Okay guys, welcome back to the channel. So today I want to go over things you should never do to your automatic transmission. Because as many of you guys know, there's many people out there who seem to think they can do whatever they want to an automatic transmission and it's going to be indestructible because that's what they hear. And the transmission's never going to have any issues and they can treat it however they feel. The saying indestructible does not mean it will not break. It just means that the manufacturer who made it usually makes very solid gearboxes, providing they're looked after correctly. Doesn't mean they're indestructible for doing stupid things like many people seem to believe. So we're going to get onto this video and I'm going to educate a lot of people on what you should never do in an automatic transmission. Okay, so right here you have an automatic transmission gear shifter, and this is what you'll find on many cars this day and age, especially going forward with electric cars. Majority of them are automatic. You're not getting no electric car in manual. So far that hasn't been made, and many people seem to favor automatic this day and age purely because they think you can do certain things to on this transmission that you can't do on a manual. The first one I want to go over is the idiotic one, which many people probably know, or many people actually do, which is revving the car up and coming from either park to D or from neutral to D. And what I mean by that is you rev the car up, you put the revs up, and that's why a lot of cars have been made now with a rev limiter. When they're at idle, so you cannot do that anymore. They only rev to about 1,500 and won't let you do that. And then a lot of people will go from N, rev it up to 3,000 RPM and then slam it straight into D. You should never ever do that. That will damage your clutch packs, damage your torque converter, and damage all the mechatronics on the gearbox and probably destroy the whole bells housing in the process. That will also destroy your Weebo bushing, especially if you've got a rear diff. That will destroy mostly the engine as well, because you're just dumping the transmission into the engine, which will actually destroy the engine. And that is not good for the life of the transmission either. As I said to you, when they say indestructible, they do not mean by doing stupidness like that. But there is still the slim majority that do think doing that is fine in an automatic transmission. That's simply not the case. It's not fine in a manual either, to be dumping a clutch and letting, just letting the clutch blow out. It's not fine to do that either, and it is not fine to do it on an automatic transmission. The next one is when you're at a stoplight, and many people leave it in D. You should never ever be leaving the car in D when you're stopped for longer than 5 minutes. If you're stopped for longer than 5 minutes, the car must go in to neutral. Now, I know many people believe you're not meant to do that. Many people seem to be under the impression that you leave it in D and pull the handbrake up, but that's simply not the case at all. All you're doing is putting strain on the gearbox and on the torque converter and on the engine by leaving it in D. If any of you have ever noticed, when you do shift to D, normally your revs will drop. Obviously the DME is meant to compensate for that when you pull it into D, because obviously you're adding extra strain onto the engine, and therefore obviously you already can see when it goes into D that the engine's already under significant strain when the torque converter engages. Therefore, when you're stopped at a traffic lights for longer than 5 minutes, always shift it to N, purely because it takes the strain off that engine and also takes the strain off the gearbox. Also, while the car is in D, you're actually making the gearbox actually have to work harder, and especially if there's extreme heat outside and the temperatures are not good, then all you're doing is putting extra wear on the transmission fluid inside the gearbox, which is going to wear down a lot quicker. So you'll wear the clutch packs, the mechatronics, any of the sleeves, everything else in the transmission. The next one is warming up the engine. Do not warm up the engines by letting them sit idle. The best way to get the automatic transmission fluid up to temperature and the engine up to temperature is to drive straight off. When I say drive off, I do not mean flooring it, redlining it, as many people would like to believe. I mean driving slow and steady. I'm telling you this as someone who's experienced, who knows what they are doing. Even with Porsches, you are not meant to leave them sitting at idle. You're meant to drive straight off, steadily, waiting for them to come up to temperature. And once they're at temperature, you can do as you wish. But many people will sit there and leave their cars idling. Not only is that bad for the environment, not only is that bad for our society, it's bad for, you know, the human environment, let alone the wildlife, by leaving a car idling, all the emissions, killing all the birds, all the deers, you know, any kind of wildlife that's out there, by polluting the atmosphere, because many people want to leave their cars idling instead of being able to turn them off, or have, like BMWs have got a feature where you can leave the car warming up while you run inside and lock the car and then come back. But you're not meant to leave them idling ever. And I think many of you guys already know that. This is something that's common knowledge, even in a theory test. When most people pass their test, it tells you to never leave a car running, but people seem to believe they need to let the car warm up. That's simply not the case. You are not looking after the car. You're actually doing more damage to the car and to the environment by letting your car warm up. Do not let your car warm up. Think of the wildlife out there, the birds, the pigeons, you know, the things that matter to us, you know, because the way I see it is we've already killed enough of them by the things we do, how we harm the environment. And by, you know, just driving off and not letting your car idle, you could actually save the environment a lot better by just doing these things correctly. But many people don't want to do that. Another thing I want to bring to many people's attention is changing gears while you're not moving. And that's purely because a lot of people seem to think they can knock it over to the manual override and be maneuvering through the gears while the car is stopped. Do not do that. That will destroy the clutch packs significantly, especially when the car is not moving, because the car is not shifting and you're putting it into gears that they shouldn't be in, and then making the DME have to revert the gears. Because many of you guys know, or some of you won't know, is if you put it into a high gear, bearing in mind it's an automatic, so it's got its own brain, the car will instantly know that it's not in the right gear, because the computer starts lagging, the engine will start bogging down, and it will shift the gear. Do not play about with the gears while stopped. It's fine to use them while you're moving, but not while you're stopped anywhere. Traffic lights, or just while you're sitting there, you know, doodling about. I know people like to stop, you know, playing with things in their cars, you know, as a way of, I don't know, dealing with nerves or boredom. They start fiddling with things, but do not do that. It's not good for your transmission, not good for the life of the transmission. The next one I want to point out is do not use the kickdown on the automatic transmission. I'm going to be honest, I do not use the kickdown on any of my transmissions. The kickdown produces significant wear on the transmission, big time. And I don't know if many of you have ever noticed, if you've ever bought a car where it will lurch into one gear, me finding all the others, for instance, it'll go fine to 1, 2, and 3, and then all of a sudden from third, it will launch into fourth. And the reason for that is purely because where owners over the time have been using the kickdown around them gearings, where they've had to kick down the accelerator to produce more power. And what that does is add significant strain not only to the clutch packs, but to the solenoids as well, for that gear ratio, especially on the BMWs, because people have a habit for using the kickdown to try and boost power. This is why BMW put the manual override and the sport override for that reason, so you can rev it out a lot more, so you don't have to really use the kickdown. But a lot of people like to maneuver it over to the sport mode and then also use the kickdown. The kickdown is terrible. If you realize what you're doing, you're actually shocking the engine and requesting the DME to shift down all the time. But in turn, what you're actually doing is when you're cruising steady, at a steady speed, and then all of a sudden you just hit the kickdown, you put the engine to basically like a shock mode, and it doesn't know what to do. And I have realized majority of the cars out there that have had the kickdown abused on these automatic transmissions are usually the ones that have the most severe problems, because people like to rinse that kickdown method. Now, I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but I just personally don't use it, and I don't believe, you know, it's a thing that you should be using, because it does destroy the transmission, and people won't believe me on this. You can go and research it yourself. The kickdown is designed, obviously, for when you're cruising on a motorway and you're from 6th to 5th, but you get a lot of people who will use it, for instance, in the city when they're in 3rd to kick down into 2nd. And over-revving the engine, putting strain on the transmission, on the gears itself, is not good. Using a kickdown is fine. Tick down from 6th to 5th, 5th to 4th and whatnot, especially if the engine's bogging and it's gone into a high gear and it's needed. But when you're already in the right gear and you can rev out, there's no point to try and use the kickdown at all, because all you're doing is significant damage to the transmission. Now, another one that a lot of people do not realize, and I know women make this mistake a lot, big time, is while an automatic transmission is still moving, they will go from here or here and then launch it straight into park while the car is still moving. That is a big, big, fat no-no. Do not ever, 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 while the car is moving in D or R, just shove it into park. You will damage the ratchet strap on the gearbox. You will damage the gearbox. You will damage the drum on the gearbox as well for the park brake. That is a complete no-no. Do not do that at all. I know there's been many transmissions and there's many cars out there, especially on eBay, where people have done that, where people have forced it from D straight into park while the car has been moving, and that will completely destroy the transmission in no time whatsoever. Do not do that. Always make sure the car comes to a standstill before you move it from D or R into P, because that will literally destroy the gearbox. And I'm telling you, I've seen it happen. There's many cars out there with this problem already, because people doing this, and the majority of the people that do it are women, because they don't know. They've got no clue. Make sure the car has come to a stop before selecting any gear. Do not just select the gears while it's moving. Do not select R while the car's still going forward, and don't select D while you're still in reverse. It's bad for the transmission. I know people like to get around quick, maneuver quickly. A lot of people seem to think automatic transmission is this easy and quicker. It's not. It takes a lot of getting used to. It takes a lot of knowledge to know how to use one of these. It ain't as straightforward as just P, R, N, and D. It doesn't work like that, because people who think like that are the ones that usually end up causing more damage to an auto transmission, and really they should stick with a manual because it's cheaper for them. And that's why a lot of people who do that end up with their cars having to have their gearboxes rebuilt. Okay guys, so there you have it. I've now told you and shown you the things you should never do in your automatic transmission. As I said, this applies for all cars. Any car with an automatic transmission, and bearing in mind, automatic transmissions are becoming more and more popular purely because of electric cars now. You're not seeing manuals anywhere anymore. And I need to make this video to make people aware of what you should not be doing in an automatic transmission, purely because what's going to end up happening is people are going to end up destroying their automatic transmissions, especially on electric cars. You do that on an electric car, God knows how much a gearbox is going to cost to repair on one of them cars, because it's going to be very, very expensive. Realistically, manufacturers do try and put a lot of safety precautions in place on these automatic transmissions to stop people being able to do these ridiculous things on these cars. But realistically, they can't put it all, and they're never going to be able to stop everybody, because people will go and remap it to be able to do this, remap it to be able to do that, especially dumping it into D. That is one I really, really hate, and I cannot stand when I see people doing that, where they dump it from N to D. Trying to make a car that doesn't have launch control act like launch control. Another one that really gets on my nerves is holding the brakes down and then holding the accelerator down and releasing the brake. I don't like all that kind of stuff, and people should not be doing that whatsoever, especially on an automatic transmission. If you want to do that, go and buy a manual car and, you know, burn out your clutch, do whatever you want to do. But an automatic transmission, they are not made for that. At the end of the day, you don't buy an automatic and try and make it into something it's not, trying to turn it into a race car. It's an automatic because you want to be, they're built for lazy drivers who don't care about speed and don't care about going fast all the time. If you want that, BMW and other brands do make cars with a better gearbox that you can have launch control, go as fast as you want, do whatever you want. But these older gearboxes are simply not made for that. So thank you very much for watching, guys. This is BMW Dr. Dean here, and goodbye.